everyone. Well, here in the corner, if you don't know where I'm at. I'm Raquel. I'll be the I'm a Whipperite here at HBS in the information technology area. I'm honored to have everybody here today. And we have some special folks here with us to talk with us and celebrate International Women's Day. So, I don't know if people have heard it before. I know I've heard it in songs. It's man's world. Well, yeah, that's kind of true. I read somewhere that women, current day, women only hold about 11 positions out of the 195 leadership positions, 195 countries. So 11 out of 195 countries actually have women in a leadership position. So yeah, it's a man's world. At this point in time, even the United Nations has not had a female Secretary General as of yet. And here in the US, only 4 of the 113 Supreme Judges have actually been women. So very, very different. Want to throw some facts out there so you could understand our current state and why here at Whipple we're doing what we're doing. I think a lot of women have contributed to where we are currently. Some of the other facts that I pulled together over the last week or so is, 1 of 5 C-suite executives is a woman, 1 in 5. I think it's like 1 out of 30 for a woman of color. So the numbers are not that great. And yet when you ask, there was a survey that I came across that asked men, do you believe that women are well represented? And they were like, yeah, definitely. However, only 1/10 of their leaders were women. So it goes to show the perception of where we are today. So yeah, I think there's definitely a little bit of a gender imbalance there. So why is this important? Why is this gathering really important? Well, people in power substantially contribute to our culture. People in power help us determine women's rights. And that's really, really important, especially when you have 70% of people living in extreme poverty that are women and children. So it's really important. Things are getting better though. And some of the efforts like Whipple that celebrate women's successes, we actually are taking the time to reflect on the progress that we have made and creating a more inclusive culture. So just a little bit of background. I'm not sure if everybody's as familiar with International Women's Day. It is observed worldwide on March 8th and can be traced back in history to about 1909. It's meant to unite the entire global community in spirit to reflect the many ways in which a woman is most important. It celebrates acts of courage and determination by ordinary women who have played an extraordinary role in history and in the countries and in the communities. So the UN theme this year for International Women's Day is Time is Now, and it's rural and urban activists transforming women's lives. So here at Whipple, we want to take that opportunity to recognize people beyond Whipple, to celebrate the various stories of transforming women's lives. So we want to share those inspiring acts with you today. Today we have very special guests here, beginning on the far left with Jane Castor, former Tampa Chief of Police. We also have Maven Now, who's a life coach, lifestyle photographer, and also a personal brand leader. Additionally, sitting next to her is Sally Osmond. She's our cybersecurity and risk strategy advisor and member of the board of Women Executive Leadership. We also have Elizabeth Turner, who's VP Digital Marketing at Bayshore Solutions. And then last but not least, we have our very own Sharon McNeil as VP of Sales and Retention. So I want to start off the conversation with just kind of opening up the floor a little bit, and if I could start off with Jane. Can you tell us a little bit about your personal experiences or compelling arguments that have influenced your career around gender equality, and what are those things that have motivated you to become more of an advocate for women?
Well, just ensuring that I think everyone knows. I doubt there's anybody in the audience that doesn't know that law enforcement is a male-dominated field. So it was really an honor for me to be named as the chief of police there, and in that position, it was very, very significant for me to be an example for other women and other young girls as well. I had a woman stop me at the spring breakfast one time and she said, I just have to tell you this. She said, my daughter saw you on television this morning at a news conference, and her daughter was 9 years old, and her daughter said, Mom, is that the chief of police? And she said, yes, it is. And she said, wow, I can be anything I want to be. So that was very significant that people are watching, that they're watching what you do, that you are an example. And I try to share that with everyone, that everyone is a leader in their particular situation, whether it's your personal life, your professional life. One other story I'd share with you is that Pam Iorio appointed me as the chief of police. And so at my swearing-in speech, I said that at the end of my tenure, I wanted to be remembered as a good chief, not as the first female chief. But in saying that, the significance of being the first woman in that position was clearly not lost on me. If a man in that position failed, then they would say, Bob can't do the job. If I were to fail, then the response would be, I told you a woman couldn't do it. So it was critical that I was successful in that position, and I worked very hard in order to be a good example for others so that they could aspire, not necessarily to be the chief of police, but to be the best at whatever they wanted. I gave a speech, one of my speeches this week was to a women's history group, and I said one of the things, actually Mayor Buckhorn was sitting there, it was kind of funny. I said that if a job requires 5 skills, women will wait until they have 6 of those skills to apply. Yeah. And men will apply before they have any skills. I'll just learn it on the job. And I told the audience, I said, now that's not scientifically researched opinion, but if you want to quote it, attribute it to Mayor Buckhorn, not to me. But it's always been significant for me. I've had a lot of help, a lot of great mentors, a lot of doors open for me by men and women, and it's significant that I try to assist young girls and women in any way that I can in our community.
Thank you. Now, I'd like to share that question also with Sally. Sally, again, is in cybersecurity and risk strategy, which is IT. Tell us a little bit about what you have experienced in the gender diversity area.
Like 30 seconds?
Yeah. Punch it down just a little bit.
Okay. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
So, I guess my background is interesting because I also started my career in law enforcement in the Middle East, in Abu Dhabi Police. And yes, in the technology department. So, my job was installing radars in the server room, go to the PBX room. For the generation here, PBX is kind of the old telephone system. And then they're like, okay, we can't have girls doing networking. You know how to code, right? Go to the programming department. So I did a little bit of Oracle development. Back in the days, 8i was like the thing. It was like Oracle 8. For the generation here, Oracle 8i was like the new, Google Glasses kind of thing. So I've done that, and then like, hey, we want to go to eGov, and we want to put all the ticketing system online. Like, you guys cannot do that. And then like, okay, why don't you manage that project? And that was really my beginning in cybersecurity, 20 years back. The challenge is to be able to allow the citizens and the nationals to go log in, be able to pay their tickets online. Obviously, I didn't have the skill set to do it, so I went and I started my master's, my first master's. The overall, the summary of those 20 years is that I had to focus on developing my skill set. I had to earn triple my peers in certification. I worked 3 jobs to get the experience. And a lot of times, I used to go there and tell them, I don't want to get paid, I just want the experience, so that I could start. And that's what I did. So I also did teaching in the faculty of higher colleges of technology. And this is how I just gained my experience. And I just focused on sharpening my saw. I think what made it easier, relatively easier to me, is that I had a father that never accepted excuses. So if I didn't get an opportunity, he would always say, because you need to work harder and prove yourself. So that wasn't fair, in my opinion. I hope you guys share it, at least, you know, be sympathetic with me, please. But I think that's really what, I think that's really what helped me progress and kind of accelerate in my career.
All right, so I want to move the conversation a little bit in terms of imagery and perception, and we have some great guests for that. I want to start off with May. I want to talk to you a little bit about the imagery that is perceived or is out there currently in social media. A few years back, there was an initiative to update our clip arts and things of that nature to make them more diverse and inclusive. So we did see that. With you in your background, lifestyle photographer, how have you been able to advocate for women in your specialty?
Wow, it's really been an amazing ride. Getting into this field has really been just a stepping stone, like we can all share these stories, right, of our lives, of what brought you to this seat here today. You could go back and you could say this and this and this, and this is why I'm here today. And the photography piece has always been a part of me since I was very young. My father was an amateur photographer, he was a physician, so we traveled a lot to conferences and got to see a lot of places. So that bug was in me, and the piece of the photography that I loved so much was the storytelling piece. I didn't know that's what it was at the time, but it was very editorial. I was always capturing the images of our family doing goofy things, and everyone was like, why'd you get me eating the pizza like that? And why did you do that? But it was funny, and it was part of the story. So for me, to answer your question, I think that story is so important in imagery, and the clip art, was updated. Our emojis are being updated too, which is kind of fun. But it is important that we see women doing lots of different things, not the things that people would associate women to be doing. And much like law enforcement, you may or may not know that the field of photography is majority male-dominated as well. So I'll go to these incredible creative conferences, and there's like all these men and very few women, which is fine by me. But it is a field that is something that you have to work towards. But it is an absolute pleasure to work with women and brands and corporations to bring out their story and to highlight what is current in the brand of the company, and to make sure that we are representing everyone that's in the company itself, and then who the people are, the employees, the people who are a part of making the company what it is, right? Because let's be real, an organization is only as good as everyone who's serving it their various roles. So when we highlight that elevates everyone, and it brings everyone to the level of knowing that you have a contribution in whatever role that you're playing in. So, hope that answered your question.
Thank you. So I have a question here for Liz in digital marketing. In the digital marketing space, have you had to customize or do different things to advocate for women in your strategy or in a strategy for a client? And if so, in what way?
I think it's a little different. Some of it starts in different ways, but I think that, from a lot of perspective, we'll get a lot of clients that come in and they think their audience is one person, or that their imagery should look one way. We do a lot of educating them that, even if you're an electrical engineer company, we don't need to just be featuring men. There's a lot of people that you've got to be talking to. So we do a lot of research and development to kind of explain to them who their voice should be speaking to, and how it needs to remain diverse. Who you thought you were 10 years ago is not who you are today, and is not going to be who you are 15 years from now. So I think that that's one area that we're really focused on, educating our clients so that they understand how to represent themselves and how to be approachable to a very diverse amount of people, whether you're female or male or whatever it may be. That understanding that where we're going today is quite different. So understanding how you speak to them, what your voice is, how are you communicating with them, how are you representing yourself, is really important and a big part of how we build a brand story as we carry it out either in web, in ads, or anything that is representing their company.
So going to our very own Sharon, in sales and retention. Sharon, in sales and retention, has there been anything that you've had to do specifically for a client or a customer in your strategy to help advocate for women or make any kind of modifications in your strategy?
You know, I think probably the #1 challenge is helping to build leadership for our customers. In the insurance industry, for those who have been in the industry for many years, I've been there 30 years, really the prototype is the young gentlemen or mature men in their three-piece suits, a little staunchy, sitting around the table, and you know, 30 years ago, that was the environment. And over the years, I was very fortunate. I had 2 great mentors, one being my mother and one being a former boss of mine. I worked alongside her for 25 years. She quickly rose to the ranks of executive leadership at the insurance company, and she believed in me, and that is probably the most important thing. So I think from a challenge that I've had over the years is to have the insurance industry embrace the women, respect their knowledge and their drive for excellence.
So you brought up a really good point there, and that was mentorship. Here at Wipro, we do participate in a Million Women Mentor, which is a great program, so we've been participating there. I'm curious which other women on the panel have had the pleasure of having a mentor? Jane?
I'm not sure that anybody doesn't have a mentor. I was very fortunate during my career to have a number of mentors in every position that I was in. And I remember one particular captain. I was a sergeant in charge of family violence, sex crimes and family violence. And I had an issue with one of my detectives, and I basically pulled my soapbox into the captain's office and got up and just went on a tirade about this individual and what I was going to do and how I was going to do it. And he just sat back and patiently listened. And then he said, well, he said, you know, you can take that path. He said, I've taken that path in the past. He goes, and I ended up on permanent midnights the next week. And I'm like, okay, what would you suggest? You know, so just a lot of people that I would say really believed in me and gave me the confidence that I needed. And that's one of the things that I believe we all need to take part in, is instilling that confidence in young girls. You know, I told a funny story about the jobs and the skills, but really it's the confidence to know that they can go out, they can put themselves out there. It's okay to fail. You know, it's better to aim high and miss than to aim low and hit your target. So we just need to make sure that the young girls are coming up with a confidence in themselves that they need to be successful. And I thank my mentors for where I'm at today, without a doubt.
Thank you. Sally, similar question for you. Have you had a significant mentor or a sponsor in your career that has really made a difference?
I had a village, really. I mean, I'm one of those people who's very lucky. Wherever I go, I'm always surrounded by excellent people. I had mentors, coaches, managers, peers, and everyone left a print in my life. And I think you touched on a very good point, which is skill set is great, but leadership and confidence is what's important. As we know, we have a lot of smart people around, but they do not progress far. There are certain attributes and personal qualities that we need to instill in our youth to make sure basically to complement what they have and to make sure that their work gets to the other side. I think we need to focus more with our youth and especially girls, not to put the burden on them, oh, you're a girl, so you have to. I really think that we need to shy away from that a little bit, in a way to make them a little bit blind. And I think sometimes it's important as a realization because it helps them to understand how they're being perceived. At least for me, where I had more of a diverse and global people. So, and I'm sure Wipro is very diverse too, and global company as Wipro. The way a female talks in certain societies may be translated completely differently than what's intended. So, coaching, so I received a lot of coaching on what I say and the message that I'm framing, what I intend to say, and how do I say it, was actually crucial to me. And it actually took me a while to master that. Yes, indeed.
Thank you. I love the fact that you pointed out the effort and the focus on women and girls and encouraging and motivating them. I also want to make sure that I am inclusive, and I want to talk a little bit about men here in terms of gender diversity. How do you, and I'll direct this question maybe starting with Jane, how do you work with men and advocate for women? What do you say to encourage and motivate men to be those advocates for women?
You could probably ask my two boys that. I have two 18-year-olds now that basically have been raised by 4 women, so they definitely know how to advocate for women. But it's, you know, it goes back, I was at the FBI Academy 100 years ago, like 2001, and we had a course there where, in essence, it was a difference between boys and girls, and it was everybody in the class before it started was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be mind-numbing, and it was the most fascinating course that I took during the entire experience, and it was a great deal of it was the neurological differences. And then the communication differences, you know, where women are just so much more democratic and they want to get everyone's opinion prior to making a decision, where men view that as a weakness, that if you have to ask someone, then clearly you don't know what you're doing. And so those are the types of things that, you know, that I always try to point out. And then just really the one issue that would handle it would be the focus on diversity. And that was something that was significant for me as the police chief. One, to ensure that our force was very diverse because everyone wanted to see someone that looked like them out in the community. But it was critical that our staff was very diverse as well, so that you could get all of those different opinions prior to making a decision. A story I tell a lot is about Sonia Sotomayor when she was being sworn in as a Supreme Court justice. And someone actually said, you know, we're afraid that your Hispanic heritage will influence your decisions. And it's like, well, no kidding. Isn't that the point of diversity? And so getting, you know, look at the audience here. Clearly, this is a company or companies that focus on diversity and recognizing everyone's talent and bringing them all together to work as a team. So I would say that with men, for me, is the focus on diversity. And the more that you deal with different cultures, genders, sexes, the more you're going to understand the people around you.
Awesome, thank you. So I want to turn it over to Liz, digital marketing. I'd just like to highlight what your background is. Similar in terms of how do you approach gender diversity in the workplace with your colleagues or with your clients?
Sure. I'm sure most of you know, I mean, similar to everybody else sitting here, advertising was definitely a man's world for a long time. I mean, they did a TV show about it, Mad Men, right? So, which really did portray where we came from, you know, where women were only allowed the clerical jobs and anybody that was important that was creating ads had to be a man. I've been in the industry about 18, 20 years now, so I've seen it grow just in that time frame. I can remember being in positions where strategies would be done by a diverse group, but when it came time to present it, only a man could present it because there was no way they were going to listen to us if the woman did. So it was definitely interesting to see as we come over the years. I think how we've overcome it is really going back to that subject matter expert and skill sets, like in and being diverse and bringing people together and understanding who's contributing, finally we got a chance to prove if the person that actually put the strategy together is the one doing the talking, it's going to resonate better, right? It was their idea, it was their research, it was their data. Somebody else just dictating it isn't going to get that emotion across, isn't going to get that, projection across, and it's going to be very, commoditized. So there's been a lot. I think I've had women leaders that have helped, I think, transform that. I've had a lot of men that I've worked with the same way that I think, I've had people that were older than me that reported to me, that called me kid, and this, that, and the other. So I think it's been a challenge, and I think one of the things that I would say is, like, just don't give up. Believe in yourself. The confidence that everybody's been talking about up here really is important. Like, stand true to what you believe in, stand by to, what you know to be true, and, just don't give up. Work hard. Similar, I think that they were saying earlier, I probably worked harder and longer than anybody else, but I was there to prove a point, and I was there to show that I knew what I was talking about, and I could help these people, and I could help these companies. So, determination.
Sorry, I can speak really loudly though. So I want to turn over to May, and I want to ask, have you had any particular challenges in working with men? And if so, how did you address those? How do you talk to other men? How do you talk to men about gender diversity?
It's a really great question. I guess I've been really fortunate in the sense that I haven't had challenges, in the sense that I could really say, oh, this is the story. But as everyone's talking and as you ask this question, this story did come to me. About a couple years ago, I'm a big journaler, journaler, right? You can say that. And I love to journal and just do these downloads about the things that I want. I do this with my clients. It's so important to spend time in your dreams and your desires, because we spend so much time doing so many other things. So I digress. So I had journaled, and I really had this thing that I wanted to work in a capacity of branding a particular company, this global company. So fast forward 4 weeks later, I get a phone call to run an event in Miami. And I'm doing this production event, and my team and I go, and it's a 4-day event. And I did have a little bit of a run-in with the creative director that was a man. He had worked with another team before. We were a new team to him. And I think he kind of sized me up, and we were an all-female team. And I kind of got the vibe that this was a little uncool for him. But I just let it go. And I was like, you know what? We're going to shine. We're going to do what we do, and we're going to do what we do the way we do it. We don't have to be in any particular way. And I would say this to men too. You don't have to be in any particular way. Just be you. Right? And for the women, just be you. When we are ourselves and when we shine in that capacity, it doesn't matter who is looking and who's, they're going to see that piece. And serve in excellence and serve in contribution. That is my biggest thing. No matter what these little hands are doing, is to be a contributor. So no matter what role we're in. So funny thing about this. So of course we do our job. It's great. I think it's fabulous. We get lots of wonderful feedback. What I didn't know is the CEO of that company was at this particular meeting. And he approaches me at the end and he said, I have never seen a team work so intuitively as your team did to really capture our brand in the way you did. And incidentally, it wasn't a branding job, it was an event coverage job. But we went in with a branding perspective because that's what we do. So that went on to go on to several projects within the company, which led to more and more wonderful things. So I say that as a word of encouragement to, first of all, don't shun away and don't hide that voice inside of you that wants to go after something that maybe seems too big for you at the time, because you don't know what's being already prepared for you along the way. You're kind of already in the setup. Right? So that was a whole setup, and I just feel like I'm proud that we just stood strong in who we were, and we didn't kind of shy away and, well, how would the big guys do it and all of that. We had small gear. They were really worried that we had small gear and we didn't have enough things we pulled off a big production, and they were really proud. So yeah, it was a good thing.
Awesome, great job, thanks. Going over to Sharon. Sorry. So Sharon, can you tell us a little bit, or give us some thoughts and ideas on ways that we can, in the audience or at home or at work, advocate for women? What can we do in our community? What can we do to support this cause?
I think we just need to be very open, work with the younger children, both men and female, and probably emphasize, don't become a victim. Don't let anyone tell you you can't do that. Don't let gender get in your way. Focus on your genius. Be passionate. And most importantly, continue to surround yourself with talented people, regardless if they're men, females. Continue to strive what you're looking for. So I would continue to, I've taught my children this. I mean, I have three successful children. I'm very proud of them. And I said, reach for it. Don't let anyone get in your way. It may require a little extra work, but be proud of what you do and don't become a victim. It's wasted energy.
So same question for Jane.
Well, I think that's great advice. I mean, that's just perfect. You should always, and what you said as well, always be yourself. I always think of the comedian Dennis Miller. He says, always be yourself, unless of course you're a jerk, then it's okay to act like somebody else. But you know, that is important, because so often people, they try to be what someone wants them to be, and you really just have to have that confidence and that comfort in yourself. Clearly you have to have the determination and the drive to, you know, to accomplish whatever it is that you want to accomplish. And don't ever, I tell, one of the things I tell, especially the young kids, goes back to not being the victim, is that everyone is discriminated against. Everyone. I don't care who you are. And clearly some discrimination is much more significant than other discrimination, but everybody is a victim of that. And what's significant is how you handle it. You know, I've had people that, you know, I say hello to, and they kind of, and I'm like, oh, what's the matter? Well, you said something to me 10 years ago. And I'm like, well, I can't remember what I had for lunch, so, and you've been carrying this around for 10 years. But that, you know, that's just very, very significant, is that things are going to happen. As I always tell my kids, life's not fair. Things are going to happen, but it's all in how you handle it, and that, you know, you don't allow that to ruin your life. I had somebody ask me one time, you know, did you ever feel discriminated against? And I've been the only woman in the room plenty of times. And you'll say something, you'll have an idea, and everybody's like, yeah, well, whatever. And then they'll go around, and then somebody else, a man, says it, and they, you know, they say the same thing, and it's like, oh my God, that's brilliant. And you're like, that. And then I saw a commercial on it where an underling said something, and they're like, yeah, and they go around to the boss, and he said the same thing, but he did the hand chop. And so I found out that was a significance to it. You had to emphasize it with the hand chop. But, you know, that is the reality. It's all about, it's you. You have to be the change in your life. You have to be the person that's determined. You have to be the one to go after whatever your prize is, and don't let anything get in your way.
Awesome, great words, thank you. So I want to go over to Sally, and I want to see if there are any things or any people in the community currently, whether celebrity or not, which you feel is really making an advancement or helping women in becoming more gender neutral in the community, so that we are more gender neutral.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question again?
So I'm wondering if you know of anyone in specific that is really, or that you feel is making a big change or big movement for the advocacy of women.
Of women. Well, there are actually a few. The biggest initiatives that I'm working with now, actually, one is the Executive Women Forum. It's a cyber security and risk and audit organization for developing women in cyber risk and audit. And it's nationwide, and we're going global. And we actually, when it started, to prep women senior managers to be executives. But then we noticed that the pipeline is not bringing enough women, so we started to go a little bit younger and as young as high schools or middle schools. So that's one initiative. And then there is the other initiative that we found I'm Nubian, I'm from south of Egypt, north of Sudan. And one of my visits to Aswan, a city in south of Egypt, I found out that tourism is really in the decline and the women are not able to sustain a living. And I noticed the sad part is that we had a lot of families migrate, the men would migrate to Saudi Arabia, Europe, Australia, whatever, so that they could feed their families, and then the women are stuck behind, not able to produce. So we started an initiative there to economically empower the women and bringing back the small businesses and hand and crafts. The tailors are tailoring back, the making bags, they're making jewelry. And I think that empowering women economically was, in my opinion, an important segue to help them with their confidence and able to stand on their feet and feed their families. So these are the two initiatives that we're currently working on at the moment.
Awesome, thank you. So turning over to Liz. Liz, also very similar question for you. Have you experienced or know of anyone or any group that you feel has really made a substantial push forward for women's advocacy?
Wow. It's hard to choose one specific woman that's in the news or one specific company. I think for me, and just in recent events, it's really the voice of all women. So women finally speaking up, women finally having the courage to have a voice in situations that they didn't feel like they had the courage to have so before. I think that particular voice is going to be more impactful than just one person or one company moving forward. So I think that's the biggest trend that, while some of the stuff has been very negative and the things that have happened, I think just those people that weren't afraid to come forward and to speak up are giving other women the confidence that they can have a voice about something too.
Thank you. Turning over to Sharon. So Sharon, we heard you speak a little bit about ways that we can encourage folks in the community. I was curious as to whether or not you've had a specific success in any one area that you wanted to highlight for support of women's advocacy.
Well, that's a tough question. I think I just have to go back to working with my children, with my colleagues here, encouraging them to be themselves and to believe in themselves. My daughter, she's certified EMT. She's going to go into the fire academy, and as you know, that's typically a men's world, and we're backing her and we're telling her she can do it, and we're very proud of her. But essentially, I just go back to, don't be a victim. You can do whatever you want.
So going to Sharon, what do you think are going to be some of the most critical changes that we have to make to really keep this moving forward? Do you think that this is just an initiative because of the Me Too movements and those things that have been in the limelight and therefore it's more popular? Do you think we're moving in a positive trend, a negative trend? Where do you see us 5, 10, 15 years from now?
Okay. Yeah, I think this Me Too movement is fantastic. I know that probably a lot of controversy, but I think that is giving voice to women and really the differences because there are differences and difference doesn't necessarily mean right or wrong. I got into a conversation with a male staff member. We were riding along in a car, and fortunately he was driving because I would have crashed the car after this, but we started talking about sexual battery, and at the same time that he said they were over-reported, I said how woefully underreported they were. And it was just the viewpoint, it was just the different viewpoint. And another example of that too is there's I call them junior high schools, middle schools in Tampa One is only girls and the other only boys. And so I go to the Great American Teach-In at Professional Day and then a Great American Teach-In at the girls' school. So I asked the principal, I said, so tell me what the difference is. You've been doing this for a few years. What have you noticed in both of the schools? And she said in the girls' school, everybody participates. They participate in everything because there's no fear of looking bad in front of the boys. And she said, and at the boys' school, everybody cries. She goes, even the dads. But, you know, it's kind of funny, you kind of laugh, but really it's allowing each gender to express themselves freely. And we expect boys don't cry. And then with the girls, you know, girls don't do this, this, or this. So there's that environment where they feel very comfortable in doing it. I personally think that the youth of today are going to do and be able in this firearms regulation issue and many other issues that they're going to be able to accomplish what the adults have failed to do. So I have a great deal of confidence in the youth of today.
Awesome, thank you so much. So I have it scheduled for an hour session, so I want to be able, and we're about 10 of a little, I want to make sure that we give the audience the opportunity to also interact. So I'm curious if there are any questions from our folks in attendance for our panel.
I have a question for Meg. I'm going to ask this question because I know how she answered it, but I think it's a really relevant question. You know, as women, we do everything, right? We take care of our kids, we go to work, and all of you ladies feel free to contribute to the answer. But what would you say to, I guess now the millennials who are coming into their own as being wives and mothers and people in the workforce? How do you balance that? What is it that you would say to us to kind of be everything that we're expected to be as women?
Wow, if I had the answer to that. It's a really great question. I think it's a question that every single woman who is also a professional and has a loved one is always going to be grappling with. But here's what I always default to. And this could have a little controversy, but follow my train of thought for a second. You know, I think for women, we're given this, you know, you could do anything you want, you can have it all. I agree with that. But I think you can do everything, you can have it all within seasons. If you try to go after everything simultaneously, it does feel like a struggle. Now, how do we get around that? If we have really great support, then we know that we can go after other things and we can tackle other things. But the best thing that I have found, for me personally, I can only speak for myself and for the clients that I have the privilege to mentor and to coach, is that to really understand what are the priorities in this season of your life. Because we're going to shift, right? It's going to be different for you 2 years from now, it's going to be different for you 5 years from now, 10 years from now, life is going to be a little different. So what are your priorities in this season of your life? And then put those big rocks in, right? We all know that analogy of like you've got the rocks and the sand and the water and the vessel. Does everybody know this, right? Well, you've got the vessel, you've got water, you've got sand, you've got rocks, and you've got pebbles. If you put the rocks in, if you put the water in, and then you try to put the sand in, and then you try to put the pebbles in, there are no room for the rocks, and the rocks represent the big things. But if you do it in a reverse order, you put the big rocks in first, then you put the pebbles, then you put the sand, then there's room for water, and there's room for everything. So I think it's just a matter of priority, and then what order you're going to put those things in, and then get support around everything else.
Any other questions?
Okay, my question is, pretty much there's no male, so we'll deal with the females, and I guess this is the forerunner, so I don't want to be biased, but I just wanted to know, like, yes, with the new movement, I'm good with it, but I want to know, like, since you guys are, I don't want to call you the older generation, but you're the going forward generation, the one that's that one ahead. Get it right, girls. You guys are ahead, right? So So you speak about the younger generation coming in. So I want to know, like, how can we, with the older guys, I get, you know, what I'm saying, those that have been there 30 years, 20 years, you understand? So how can you guys show this new movement how to work together so that the younger generation can have something positive to look at? Because you're always going to need an example. But I guess what I'm trying to say, for the men not to be intimidated by the women, or the women by the men, so that if my younger brother, my younger sister, they can all work together so we can all move up in the ladder. So what suggestion would you have, since you're already in the field and you see the areas what can be improved, so we can work as a family, I guess, in coalition?
She meant experience, by the way.
You look great.
Actually, I'll answer that, and in my opinion, I'm very biased on this. I think it really starts at the home, at the house. And I know my son would be like, you shouldn't have let my mom answer this question. I really think it's how we raise up our children. If we raise up our children in a manner where, you know, you tell your son, please do this. Like, no, why do I have to do it? And you know, he gives you a hard time. Then you look at your daughter like, okay, come on, honey, please take care of that. Oh yeah, don't worry about it, mommy, I'll take care of it. No, everyone is responsible for their own actions. Yeah. So I think the starting as a family and as children at a young age, then it doesn't become a challenge, or he as an adult, when he grows up, he's not gonna feel intimidated. He's gonna immediately grow up, you know, and gradually, and responsibilities increase with age. He's gonna be like, I'm expected to do this. I'll do it. That's my job. That's me. But if here we are, suddenly, you know, he's 21. You know, fast forward, he's 21, 25, and you would look at him like, you're supposed to do this. I'm like, oh yeah, this is because of this movement. You guys are empowering all these women against us, and you're rebelling, and because this is really what's happening in a lot of societies. And in some societies, they're looking at this as like, what's wrong with these aggressive women? What is it that they're looking for? You know, so this is just my view. I'm sure we can learn from other experiences.
Any others?
I was going to ask a question until you said that, Sally, about the family thing, because I think there's a dichotomy with men where you can look around the room here, these are all good men. Great fathers to their daughters, great husbands, but then you've got the work piece where you come into the corporation and it's almost like you leave that behind, right? So it's almost like the good person doing nothing is almost like complicit. So yeah, we say we're not racist, we're not misogynist, that's 50, 60 years ago because it was in your face. But there's still that institutionalized, systemic, you know, when you talk about pay equity and family leave, which affects women more than men. And then, Jane, you said the crybaby thing with men. That's true. So if a man perceives inequity, he's going to keep crying about it till, you know, HR does something. But it's the double-edged sword where, you know, yeah, my daughter versus my son, she's stronger, she's going to battle through it, she's not going to go cry about it, and she's going to deal with it. But the institutionalized kind of mindset of, when you talk about anything, when you talk about racism or you know, inequity between men and women, how can we as men who sit here and say, hey, we're not part of the problem, we're the good guys, how do we change that? How do we advocate for women like Jay behind me here? I'm sure his daughter might call him from the university and say that she perceives some inequity. He'd probably jump in the car, drive over there, and get in somebody's face. But women are strong enough that they don't need a man to come to the rescue, right? I don't want my daughter thinking she needs somebody to come to her rescue. So, level playing field, when we talk about, you know, hey, you know, I got black friends, I'm not racist, you know, I got a daughter, you know, but what are you doing to affect change that removes those barriers? So yeah, we're all on a level playing field, all have the same opportunities, But then there are those little things throughout your career that knock you off. You know, my wife decides to have a baby, you know. There's 6 months where you're diverted for a little bit, you know, and you miss an opportunity here and there. And then the pay gap thing, you know, what is it? If you see that inequity, are you supposed to stand up and say, you know what, I don't accept that, right?
Yeah, I hear you, and it's not, I mean, we talk about a level playing field, you know, and I gave the experience of the class where, in essence, they told the difference between boys and girls, and that is a reality. I mean, there are going to be differences, there are going to continue to be differences. If you look at parenting, and it's one of the things I noticed in the police department, men are so much more involved as parents now, and a lot of it has to do with the schedule that our officers work. They work 4 days on, 4 days off, and some of the married couples will be on opposite shifts so they can take an equal part. But the reality is always going to be that women, the moms, are the ones. I mean, just have a college kid call home, dad answers the phone, and it's like, hey, Dad, how's it going? Is Mom around? So, you know, it's that is a reality. And men are stronger physically than women are. That is a reality. So those types of things, there are differences. Differences aren't wrong. But when it comes down to things like discrimination or the pay equity, those types of things, then it will be changed through experience. One of the things, I had a class on millennials, learned probably more than I wanted to know about millennials, but one thing was that the only time that diversity crosses their mind is when it's absent, because they've been raised in, and that was a thing with me. I was raised out in North Tampa, and there was no diversity. My children went from kindergarten on up with diversity, and they would think that it was strange if it was missing. You know, and then actions in your particular world, when you see things, to change it, or someone says something to you, not being defensive, but saying, yeah, maybe that was taken the wrong way. For example, I was a chief of police, and an officer subject came up about a couple things. One was a promotional situation, and somebody mentioned that, oh, I heard such and such was pregnant, and I, you know, about grabbed him and tossed him physically out of the room. Like, because she was pregnant, she couldn't be considered for promotion. And another one was the legal advisor saying, as soon as we find out that an officer's pregnant, she has to come off the street. And I said, no, she'll come off the street when she wants to come off the street, and not a minute before. So, you know, we'll just adjust the uniforms and the gun belt if that's what she needs. But those are the ways that it's changed. It's not going to change overnight, and there's always going to be differences, but we have to recognize those differences, and we have to work together to make those changes.
I want to thank you all for coming and sharing the message, because I think that this is kind of the answer, right? More discussion about this, more examples of, and sharing of experiences. But I want to ask you this question. We hear mostly about what women can and should do to stand stronger, right? To advocate for themselves, to not be pushed down. And that's all the right message. I don't disagree with that at all. What we don't hear enough of, and I say this not just about women, but about racial injustice, you know, all of these, you know, these minority movements, minority classes. What can those among us who are gender privileged or racially privileged, we have a part in this, right? There's women, minorities are not going to solve their own challenges on their own. What can those of us who enjoy privilege and don't even recognize it, what do you recommend that we be doing and paying attention to in order to help make this change that needs to come?
Good question.
Nobody else jump in. That is excellent. That is an excellent point. Become educated. Get involved. It's and I don't know how much time we have left, but when I swear in the new officers, and I swear them all in, or when I was a chief, I don't go now, but I would talk about the power of their badge, that they had the ability to take someone's freedom away, in rare cases, their life, and they needed to understand that power and never abuse it. And I would tell them several things, but one story that I told them was that early on as a police officer, I pulled someone over in West Tampa, and he had a tag that didn't belong on the car. It was actually a criminal offense. So I just wrote him a citation. I went off, kind of pat myself on the back for giving the guy a break. I come down Main Street a couple months later and I see him, so I stop. Hey, how's it going? He goes, well, it's not going good. And I said, well, what happened? He goes, you remember that ticket you wrote me? I barely remembered it. He said, well, I couldn't afford to pay the fine. He said, so they suspended my license and my insurance dropped me. He goes, and I had to sell my truck in order to pay for that, and I'm a junk man. That truck was my livelihood. So for me, I just wrote a citation and thought I was being wonderful because I gave him a break, when in essence, that was a life-changing event for him. And the point of that story wasn't to the officers never to write tickets. The point was, understand the people that you are serving out there on the street. And I think that's the most important lesson, and the way that you can contribute to your community is to look at people from their point of view, take that walk in their shoes and see how you can help.
And I think in addition to that too, because like you said, like be involved, it's don't wait for a law or a regulation or a company to do it for you, right? Like that's not how this change is going to happen. This change is going to happen in every decision you make. So if you're in a leadership position and you're deciding who to promote and who not to promote, it shouldn't be about the way they look, the way they dress, what they're male, if they're female. It should be about the work that they put in, the knowledge that they have, who's going to be better at that job. And every person in every position that you're in every daily work, you make decisions about who to work with. If you're playing dodgeball, you make decisions about who to pick for your team, So, and I would just encourage you that if you're in those positions and you're making those decisions to think about it in that way, because we can't wait for it to come from here. It's got to start with us.
Hi, everybody, and thank you, ladies, for, I'm inspired by you guys. I have a question. I want to know, how can I get involved in the community, because as my heart is growing so large for the missing and exploited kids, and I just wanted to know, how can I be a voice, because I feel that there's an absence. Like, for example, like if a new kid come into a school, can there be like a main database where they like, wait a minute, this child, I think I saw this child on the Missing and Exploited Kids website. How can we get involved? Community, the hospital? This is my question.
There are a number of organizations that, matter of fact, I just spoke at one about a month ago, but through the FBI and for human trafficking. And that is a very big issue, not only in the nation, but in our community. And not only in the sex trafficking, but bringing in women, basically putting them in as indentured slaves and working as cleaners in hotels and those types of things. But there are a number of organizations, and I can get with you and give you some names of individuals. Dottie Groover Skipper is one, and there's a group out in Sun City, these elderly women that make up backpacks for the kids, and when we rescue a woman or a young child from human trafficking, we give them the backpack, and it has a set of clothes in it and toiletries and those kind of things. And when I gave it to the detective that works our on the FBI Human Trafficking Task Force, he called me about 3 days later, and they had rescued a 16-year-old girl the night before from a new dancing place. And he gave her that backpack, and she burst into tears, and she said no one had ever given her anything in her entire life. So there's a big need. The social media, you may not be aware, but that's where the recruiting goes, is through the social media, and they're getting these young girls into the sex trade. and it's very, very sad, but there is a great need for volunteers in that area, so thank you for inquiring.
Thank you. Okay, so my question is, while aggressively climbing these towers at work to get to the next promotion, how do you balance that with still being seen as feminine? And how do you do both?
I love this question. Well, my dad always used to say, you need to act like a girl a little bit. I'm like, why? So, for some time, many years back, it was perceived that for a woman to ask for her right, she has to speak like a boy, talk like a young man, and act like a man. Not really. Actually, I know a lot of girls, they actually get what they need to do by being cuties and who they are. So I think that perception, in my opinion, is changing, which is good. In my opinion, which is more important in being who you are, I still believe that you have to craft your message to the audience, to the person that you're talking. I mean, if someone appreciates stories, then definitely ask, go for your request with a story and history and context of what you need for him, to help you with. But if someone is very direct, and straightforward, and he just wants to get to the point, then, just go. So that's just adjusting. It's more of a communication style. I hope I answered that question.
Any others that want to tackle that?
I was just going to say the same thing. It's really more about being who you are. If you're a very feminine person and you're a girly girl that likes to wear dresses and this, that, and the other, don't be afraid to be that person. That shouldn't be the indicator of how you climb that tower. My daughter hates to wear dresses. Hates it. She's 9, and she's like, if you put me in a skirt, I'm this full all day long. I'm not going to force this. She won't even wear it for pictures, for crying out loud. You're just like, whatever. But I want her to be who she is. I want her to be what she's comfortable with. And then as she grows that tower, it's not about losing yourself as a woman. It's about working hard and gaining the knowledge you need to get there. And I think what she was saying, learning how to craft your message, everybody needs to be talked to differently. I mean, in my world, the way I talk to a creative person is very different than the way I talk to a developer, right? It doesn't matter if they're man or woman, but they're different people that have different ways of processing. So learning that is a lot more important than changing who you are.
First of all, I want to say thank you to all of you for being here. It's very inspiring and insightful observations and thoughts from all of you. My question is, how do you see the relationship between women and, I say this in a smile, and world peace? I know women and peace sounds like an oxymoron. But, they say that the survival of the species is in the hands of the feminine. What are your thoughts around it?
I agree. I'll have to give an amen to that. As stated, I think women are just more democratic and look at things in a different way. If I boil it, which you were talking world peace, so my analogy is probably pointless, but as a woman in law enforcement, there was such a long time that women weren't allowed to be in law enforcement because the viewpoint was that it was all about muscle and testosterone and overtaking the bad guy. When I go before the teach-ins and I had all my gear on and gun belt and all that, I would always ask the kids, what's the most important tool that I have? And of course, it was either the gun or the taser. And I said, no, I would point to my mouth. I said, it's my ability to communicate. My ability to talk my way into or out of a situation is what is the most significant. And there has been, in the last decade, calling for more women in law enforcement, because there are a lot, and I've been in some knockdown, drag out fights, and as I say, they were caused by male police officers. Whether they did anything or not, they could just show up, and that, you know, the appearance of that testosterone, next thing you know, you're rolling around on the ground. Or sometimes they cause those fights, but it was, you know, it was your ability to communicate with people, to talk to people. So I agree with that statement that, you know, if you're looking for, I saw someone from the UN, and there was, he was talking about another world leader, and that they had over, you know, the people in power were commensurate with the population. In other words, they had many, many women in power. And when the individual asked him about that, he said, why do you have so many women in power? And he said, well, we can't afford to ignore half of our population. So I think it's very significant, and that things will change the more we get. Not that men are doing a bad job, I just, when it comes to peace, I think women are the answer with that.
Can I just add one more thing? You know, it has been said that, and just to piggyback on what you were just saying, that there is life and death in the power of the tongue. And it is in what we say and how we can get ourselves out of a situation, how we can talk ourselves into a situation. The communication piece can't be stressed enough. And in a situation where we're in a corporation, or we're in our family corporation, you're the CEO of your home, you know, it's important to have that leadership role of understanding there's always a why behind the behavior. And if we could just kind of take a breath in a moment and then just sit back and say, I wonder what is happening in this person's life that's having them behave in this way. I think for just a moment, it might alter our reaction and allow us to be more proactive in what we're doing. And just stepping into that piece. You know, Wayne Dyer, who's one of my favorite mentors, has this quote that he's famous for saying, and it says, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And that is the biggest significant piece. It's the perspective that we have.
Any other questions?
Hello, my name is Margot. I'm a millennial. As a millennial, I think it's inspiring everything that's been said today, all the questions that have been asked. I think it's great that you have to start at a micro level, but first you have to start with yourself. Starting as someone so young and IT, male-dominated, how can I find a mentor? Because I have a wonderful mother, I have a great support system, but how can I develop my IT skills to be better as an employee and hopefully as a leader one day? Are you accepting any mentorees?
Yeah, women in IT actually are expanding in Tampa, and I can connect you with that chapter. And they do actually have a program for mentoring, and they do assign you a mentor. So yes, let's connect.
All right. Any others?
This is for any one of you on a panel or multiple people. How we've discussed in Raquel's stats about how most industries are male dominated. What suggestion do you have or advice do you have to give to women to be able to deal with the frustration of beating your head against that wall, trying to get ahead? Because everyone in here, and I'm sure all of you guys, have had to deal with a lot of frustration.
We're all trying to grab it like I'd just like to say, you know, you're above it. And if you allow those type of attitudes to bring you down, you gotta rise above it, right? So it's all improving yourself, and you may have to work a little harder, but once you believe in yourself and you really know your area of expertise, you're able to lead by example. You just gotta take the high road. I still have experiences today. We're all going to meetings. It's very clear through body language, trying to dominate the conversations. And, you know, I'll just sit back and chuckle to myself and say, go for it. But at the end of the day, I know what I'm talking about, and eventually we'll come around. So, I just, you can't let it bother you. It's gonna happen. It's gonna happen for quite a while.
I would support that, because it is, it's going to happen, so you gotta have the confidence to keep yourself above it. I think in addition to that, it's important to have a support system. I was very lucky that it started very young for me. My mom basically said, I don't care what you do when you grow up, you could be a trash collector if you want to be a trash collector, but be the very best trash collector there. Have pride in your work and have accountability, and if you have that, then at the end of the day, you'll know that you're going home and you've done exactly what you need to do. So having that confidence, but I was also blessed to have friends. I have a lot of friends in the workforce, and we'd beat our heads against the wall together, right? We would vent to each other, we would pat each other on the back, we'd give each other that support. So whether it's a support system at home or your friends or your mentor, you'll need that too, because you are gonna get down occasionally. There's no reason why you can't get right back up.
Hey there, guys. I basically have a question about women and being small business owners. I know it's a big leap to take when it's just you and you have this idea and you're focused on something and you really want to do something. I just want everybody to have a confidence in themselves. And I wanted to know if you guys are aware of any workshops that women can go to that will allow them to give them the confidence to, or the knowledge to open up their own businesses, or even spark an idea within themselves to start their own businesses.
I don't know if you're familiar with SCORE, S-C-O-R-E. I started with them when I used to live back in DC. I started them for this Nubian initiative. You know, I'm a corporate person, I don't know anything. I'm an engineer. You know, I don't know, I mean, I'm good in math. I know how to make sure that my budget doesn't crash, but starting a business and the accounting side of it, you know, and make it an Inc. versus LLC and all of that. Actually, if you go with SCORE, and I think they have a Florida chapter, so it's S-C-O-R-E, and they connect you with local resources, with an accountant, with a business advisor, and they actually give you templates. So they gave me the template for the financial projections. Basically, I was starting the Nubian Village. It's a cultural and heritage center to help the women in Nubia. And so they gave me that template. They also helped me write the proposal for the SBA grant, the SBA loan. I think they call it that 504 or something. And believe it or not, you get approved. I didn't think that would happen, but I got approved. So if you, I mean, there are some resources on that. Another good resource is the Chamber of Commerce in Tampa. I was impressed by the offerings that they have. And I think they also have they partner with USF, and they have a lot of classes. Some of them are free, some of them you pay $5 or $15, depending on the speaker and the topic that they're offering. So if you need further resources, we can connect about that.
Any other questions? Oh, we got one in the back. Yeah.
Ladies, I thank you for being here today. You've inspired all of us. I have a question. Since you all hold esteemed positions, do you see it in your future to run for higher political office? For example, the first woman president?
There's a plan. That's great. Yeah, yes, I do intend to run for mayor of the city of Phoenix. Thank you very much. You know, when it was first brought up, someone asked me about that, and I said, you know, I've been 31 years in law enforcement. You know, I'm a cop is what I am. But I clearly love this city. I was born and raised here. And there are so many things that are happening in our community right now that we have a lot of thoughtful development that needs to be continued, and just so many wonderful things. I know I'm a little prejudiced being born and raised here, but Tampa is the greatest city in the nation. The Tampa Bay area. Thank you all very much. And anyone who doesn't live in the city, just go ahead and move in the next 6 months. I would really appreciate that. Are you going to take any more questions?
That would be our
Okay,
question.
let me, and this goes back to, you know, people that were saying, what can we do for the community? And just talking about, you know, doing our part in working together and understanding everyone's differences. I was listening to this great podcast, Constitutional. If you haven't listened to it, it's fabulous, about the crafting of the Constitution and all of the amendments. And there was a Supreme Court justice back in the late 30s, and he said, his quote was, "Knowledge is critical to understanding, and understanding should always precede judgment." So I think that's a great way to leave everybody today. Keep that in mind. Thank you all.
So I have the privilege of closing the meeting, and man, I feel like a woman. Is that how the song goes? Dawn, that's a terrible joke. No, actually, as a parent of a 20-year-old daughter, I really wish she could have been here today. I actually shot her a note earlier this morning and told her that there was going to be a panel discussion, and that it would be really inspirational, but I think I underestimated it. It was really great. So I wish she could have been here. And, you know, there's days, I've been at HPS for 30 years, and there's days that, you know, you're not so proud to be here. You know, it's been a rough day, we're running into tough customers, but this is a day I'm proud to be a Wipro HPS employee, that we're putting on something like this. So, why don't you keep the applause going a little bit more? I want to, just one more thank you for these guys. I also took copious notes because I think it's important. A lot came out that I learned today. The one thing I learned, I think the most important message is, it's not just a woman's issue. This is all of our issues, and I think as males in our company, this is the fight we should all be taking on, right? And so some things that you may not know that I've been asked to speak just briefly about is that Wipro really does have a strong history in fighting diversity in the workplace. And there's a couple of things that you may not know about but I think you'll start hearing more about. One is the Women of Wipro initiative that runs programs throughout our organization internationally that focuses on mentoring and leadership development for women. And it's viewed as leading edge, not just in our industry, but really globally, overall industries. And they continue to fight not just against conscious biases, which I know exist, but even those unconscious biases. And I think those unconscious biases are the ones we really need to be watchful of. And that's really where I learned a lot today, and I want to be cognizant of that. And so through hiring practices, through practices on promotions, those are some of the things behind the scenes that are going on that I think are really working to take, to put this in better light. There's some stats that you gave earlier that are sort of unfortunate stats, but there's some health plan services statistics that are a little bit brighter than that. We're not where we need to be, but here's a few of them. About 65% of our workforce at HPS is women. And more than 35% of our women are in a supervisory, management, or leadership role. Again, Probably not where we need to be, but certainly better than industry average, and it's something I think we can continue to work towards. But again, the important message is that the work is never done. We got to keep working at this and move the ball forward. So we want to say thank you one more time, and we have some gifts for you. Are you going to pass those out? Okay, we've got some gifts for the panelists, and I think the neatest part of this gift is that Wipro would like to provide each of you with a check that will go to the charity of your choice. So we will be talking to you about that. So again, thanks everyone for showing up today. Make sure you take the message out to those that couldn't be here today. And there's going to be more of this kind of informational, educational things going on at HPS. So thanks, have a great weekend.